Hi friends, in this video we will understand method overriding in depth, interview point of view. Okay. Nowadays interviews are tricking on this kind of method overriding questions. Not only this, to understand the knowledge on overriding, even today online tests also like Hacker Rank, Hire Pro, those also giving definitely at least one question on method overriding to test our knowledge. How they are giving, what kind of questions they are asking. So we will go through those questions today. Okay, if you have any questions or doubts, if you need more information, you can ask me in the comments section. Okay, so basically we know, right, method overriding. What is method overriding? We know, right? So if a parent class has some method and if the child class also having the same method name, with the same method name and with the same return type and with some default with some access modifier, if you have everything same, then what will happen is child method will override the parent method. So we are calling it as overriding method. So anyway, we will see what kind of questions we will get in the interview. Okay, so first thing nowadays they are asking, the more important thing they are asking is on exceptions. Actually, if parent method is throwing some exception, can the child method can we create without throwing any exception, or can we throw any other exception? So those kind of questions nowadays I'm frequently seeing even in interviews, even in written tests, those online tests. So first we'll cover that, then we'll go one by one. Okay, so see here, let's say method m1 is there, so it is not throwing any exception, right? I'm fine. So I'm not handling any exceptions also. Wherever I'm using the parent class, I won't handle exceptions. Suddenly if m1 comes, child comes, and if it try to throw some exception, it will throw, I will declare it as, it will throw that some exception. Will it allow like this? It is not allowing, right? It is giving red mark here, it is giving some compile time error, right? It is not allowing. You know, this we will learn now. We will just memorize. Okay, whenever child doesn't throw exception, parent throws some exception, so it doesn't allow. We will understand now. Okay, but after few years, if someone asks us, we will forget it, because we are memorizing it. We are not understanding the concept here. So but I will tell you why, what compiler is checking actually. We will understand the logic behind this. Okay, simple. See, when first parent is created first or child is created first? Parent is created first, parent class is created first, and we will start using it in so many places in our application, right? Child will come later. If I want to utilize, if I want to override this method, or if I want to use some other methods of the parent class, then child will come and it will extend the parent. And if I don't want to use this functionality, then what I will do? I will override this method, right? Child will come later anyway. And by the time I create the child class, parent is already in usage, right, in so many places. Since the method is not throwing any exception, I am not handling the exceptions anywhere. Suddenly if I override this method m1 with some exception, it will break the code, right? Wherever we are using the parent class, it will break that, right? You may ask me how it will break. See, whenever we are overriding, normally we should think like, maybe this parent can store its child class object also. This parent class reference variable can store child class also like this, child class object also like this. It should provide that capability. Java will provide that capability. So that's why at any point of time we can replace parent with child. So that is possible in Java. In that case, if you do like this, we are not handling the exception, right? So that's why child is not, compiler is not allowing us. See, already parent is in usage. If parent doesn't throw checked exception, please don't throw checked exceptions. You also, child also should not throw the checked exception. So that is what the compiler is saying. So that's why compiler doesn't allow to throw checked exceptions here, but it will allow unchecked exception, like let's say null pointer exception. If I return like this, if I throw like this, it will allow. Why it is allowing? Simple. No need to handle the unchecked exceptions, right? No need to handle. Checked exceptions should be handled with the try catch or throws, but unchecked exceptions no need to handle. So parent method is anyway, it is not throwing any exceptions. So child method, even though it throws unchecked exceptions, that is okay, right? So that's why it is allowing. And one more thing, let's say parent method throw some checked exception. Let's say IO exception. Definitely I will make it as a parent. So okay, we'll assume that parent is already in usage in so many places. You say it is being used like this, and anyway it is checked exception, so we need to handle it either throws keyword or try catch. Here I will handle with try catch. Okay, IO exception I am handling. Now child method I am not throwing any exception. Is it fine? Yes, it is fine. Why? Because if I don't throw any exception, it is not impacting this code, right? Yes, it won't impact, because IO exception M1, if I replace it with child, it will work still, because it's not throwing any exception. It won't be handled in this exception, so it is allowed by the compiler, right? Now let's make it parent. Let's say I will try to throw exception. See, it is not allowing. Why? Simple. Can this IO exception can store an exception object? Let's say p1 m1 p1.m1 returns exception object. Can IO exception can store the reference variable of this exception object? No, right? It is a subclass, right? So that is why whenever we throw some checked exception, in the child method we cannot throw its parent class exception, because in so many places it's been already in usage. So wherever we are handled that exception, suddenly it cannot handle the parent object, right? Parent exception object, right? So that's why compiler will warn you, hey, don't throw parent exception like this, because we are handling its child class exception. Not if you throw suddenly this parent class exception, so many places code will impact. So that's why I am not allowing you to do like this. So this is how compiler will check. Interesting, right? So this is how we need to remember. Now let's say this is IO exception. If this is exception, so definitely we will handle it try catch like this, right? p.m1. So parent class is throwing the exception. Parent class is throwing the exception. I am handling the exception. Now suddenly child comes, and if it throws the exception, that is fine. If it throws some other exception like IO exception, will it allow like this? Definitely it will allow. Why? Because IO exception, if it throws suddenly, if I replace it with child, if it throws IO exception, some places I may be using like this, some places I might be using like this, and here I might be using the child, right? So these two places should handle both the exceptions, right? Exception and IO exception. It will handle, because exception can store its child class object, right? So it is allowed. So that's why IO exception, and that means child class exceptions we can happily throw in the child methods, child overriding methods. So this is how we need to remember method overriding in case of exceptions like this. So this is the nowadays wherever I see in HackerRank and HirePro or in interviews also, these kind of questions they are asking in overriding. Remember this. Now this is with respect to the exceptions. Now we'll talk about other things in case of overriding, what we need to remember. p dot m1, let's say. Okay, so return types. Okay, let's say parent method is returning something, child method can also return something. Is it allowed? Allowed only in one case. That too we will discuss. Let's say parent is returning some string object. Okay, I will return some string object. Okay, return hello. Okay, and definitely if you return something, definitely we will be storing that and getting that by calling the method, and also let's say I will be printing that. Let's say this is how I will be using the parent class. Suddenly the child comes, and if a child doesn't return anything, this will break, right? Because this is how I am using in one place, and in other place I will be using this like this. Definitely I will be using like this, because to understand the dynamic binding, you know, right? In dynamic binding I will be doing like this. Sometimes parent may refer this own parent class object, sometimes the same parent can refer its child also. So if I start using like this, it will break, right? It will break. Why? Because I am not returning anything here. So that's why compiler won't allow you, hey, if you return something in the parent, you should also return, otherwise I won't accept. So that is how compiler will complain on you. So that's why we should return something here. So what we can return? Should we return only string object? Yes, if you return string, that is fine. Let's say this is hello world, that is fine. If you return string, that should be fine. Okay, if you return string, that should be fine. And can we return only string? Can I return some other thing that the interviewer will ask you? Let's say I want to return object here. Is it possible? It is not possible, because same question, same thing. See, if I start using like this, right? Suddenly, let's say I'm handling like this, right? I'm returning object, right? But here, I have already started using like this string. So it should allow only string type only. Suddenly, if you return object, can string store the object? No, right? So that's why superclass objects we cannot return. For example, if I do like this, object and string, in parent class already I started using, and here I am storing it as an object, right? And if I am doing like this, here also I will be using object, because compiler will check it should be object only. Suddenly if I return string in the overriding method, that should be fine, because parent class reference variable can store the subclass object. So whenever we are overriding, the child method return type should be subclass of the parent method return type. So this is what we need to remember. No need to remember, it's easily we can think at that point of time, because see, I am using already this one, I'm storing the result in an object. Suddenly if I return string, the object can also store string, so we are good. But if I return string, if I suddenly return object here, oh, it cannot, the string variable cannot store the object variable, right? So okay, it cannot, so it won't allow. So that's how we can remember. It's very easy. So these kind of questions are being asked. And one more level is access modifiers. Let's say here I'm not it is a default, okay, but here public, is it allowed? It is allowed. Why? Simple. See, it is a default, parent is default, that means it is accessible, this method is accessible only within the package. I am making it public, overriding method. Then does it impact the existing code? No, right? I am just increasing the scope, that is fine. So wherever I am using the parent, so it's already being used within the same package. Suddenly if I comes if I come and if I increase the scope of the child method, in the existing parent class usage will break or not? It won't break, right? So that's why it is allowed. But if it is public and if it is default, so it is not allowed. Why? When I say public, it is already being used in outside the package. But if the child comes and override that method with the default, it cannot be used outside the package, right? So that's why it won't allow. But how to remember this? Simple. We cannot restrict the access modifiers. We can increase the scope, but we should not decrease the scope. So this is how interviewers are asking. You need to remember. Okay, these are very important concepts in depth with respect to the overriding. Simply understanding the definition overriding is not enough. When I was 3 years of experience, I just learned the definition of method overriding, how the dynamic binding happens, and went to interview room. After going to the interview room, when I was asked these kind of questions, my mind was blown away. I couldn't answer these questions. So later I realized that okay, this is how we need to understand the overriding in depth to face the interview questions. Okay, thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe and comment if you need more videos. Thank you. Bye bye.